Welcome to today's podcast or vlogcast, Voices of Ecosystem. And today I have an American guest. I'm very proud of to have him here. Andrew is a representative from the ecosystem world from different sides. That is what I already can say. On the one hand, from the entrepreneurial and innovation side, and on the other hand, also from the business ecosystem side, with a focus on agriculture. So that will be also one of our topics in the next minutes. So first of all, Andrew, thank you for having you here. Great, looking forward for the conversation.
Well, thanks for having me, Julian. Always excited to talk about ecosystems. And anytime I can have kind of like a podcast that explains what an ecosystem is, that I can send to my wife or my mom, that so they understand what my job is, I think that's really helpful for me.
That's great. I'm still also trying to do so to explain that to the world and to also my relatives. Some already have understood it. Some I'm still doing work in progress. But no, just kidding. So let's get it in. Let's get started. So Andrew, maybe you can actually introduce yourself even better than I can do in a broader sense. So maybe you can let us know and the audience know what is actually your current job. What are you focusing at? And so where's your relationship, let's call it like this, to the topic of ecosystems.
So Andrew Jason, the official title is Ecosystems Director for Grand Farm. I'll kind of get into what that means, but a little bit about background on myself is, my background is media publishing. So I helped run a publishing company for about 9 years here, focused on a lot of regional storytelling, journalism, kind of lifestyle, business, sports, that standpoint. And so we're based here in Fargo, North Dakota, and I've been here about 15 or 16 years now, and the growth that has happened in our region is amazing. And when I started to discover that kind of like Fargo's niche and differentiator when it comes to why the business community and entrepreneurial scene was growing, was due to a man named Greg Tavine. I worked closely with him over the years with the media, and he started him and a bunch of other co-founders started this organization, a nonprofit called Emerging Prairie, which has existed to connect and celebrate the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So a lot of that kind of entrepreneurial ecosystem building that you'd expect. A lot of events, a lot of meetups, a lot of running a co-working space. We run TEDx Fargo, the largest TEDx in the world. Things like that. And so real just kind of quickly, Emerging Prairie is kind of the parent organizations, and within there, Emerging Prairie has a mission of energizing ecosystems, right? And so within there, there's kind of three ecosystems we focus on. So there's entrepreneurial, so we still do a lot of programming activities to support founders as they get started and to encourage them to start their own business. Then we have a technology ecosystem. So we run Emerging Digital Academy, which is a 20-week coding boot camp. So the idea is meant to fill those tech jobs that exist, that are oftentimes the founders. And then the third one is the innovation ecosystem, which is really highlighted by kind of Grand Farm, which is this initiative to support this global ecosystem around innovation in agriculture. So if you think about I like to think about Emerging Prairie as a Venn diagram. So you got Emerging Prairie right here in the middle, and then you have these three ecosystems that are surrounding it.
Cool. Thank you for letting us know that in detail. And for me, that is kind of referencing to the Silicon Valley of North Dakota, kind of. Is it like this? So you have the same ingredients, but with a dedicated focus topic. But first of all, you also try to create innovations, innovative business models out of that what you have there as assets, as resources in the region. Is it kind of that?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. The name, so we're right in the middle of kind of prairie farmland. So the name Silicon Prairie has been thrown around a lot. But, we really think that there's kind of like this feedback loops that need to take place, right? And this is kind of how we think about it from the Grand Farm side, but I think it's pretty relevant for any ecosystems, is that there's really 6 key groups that need to be involved. So you need your big corporates, they're the ones that have the market influence, the drive, the money. You need to have the startups. So that's where the technology, the innovation is often happening. You need to have the education. So that's where the research is coming from the universities. That's where the workforce is coming. You need to have the policymakers. So you need to make sure that the regulations, the incentives, kind of all that lines up. You need to have the investors. So that could be the banking, traditional banking community. That could be venture capital, things like that. And then on the Grand Farm agriculture side, specifically, the other piece is the growers. You need to make sure that the farmers are being heard too. So we think, kind of what I've discovered is that kind of like our niche and our specialty is that all these groups are really super interconnected, and there's these feedback loops and conversations going. North Dakota only has a population of 800,000, and there's a joke that everybody knows everybody in North Dakota, and it's not really a joke because it's pretty true.
Okay, sounds good, but once again, coming back to that, what you're describing with the six elements or six pillars, I mean, five of them you definitely will find also in big cities, like also, I mean, in Berlin, where my university is located, of course, in the Valley, and in London, Paris, and other parts of the world. But this latter point, in terms of, I would call that's asset to a certain business domain, yeah, with all of that. This is something which is often regional or at least, or sometimes also local. So is that also what you would say, what you would describe as the special element? And first question, and second, do you find other similar ecosystem activities somewhere also in the US or even internationally? Are you connected to them, or is it really something special what you have created there?
Yeah, I would say that, kind of our model of these three ecosystems colliding and these collisions happening is pretty unique. I haven't discovered anybody else. We're pretty passionate about it, so we've been kind of singing its praises and its opportunities, and have been talking with other communities around this possibility. This idea of kind of like those five groups talking. There's a lot of kind of similar groups that we've worked with around the country. A lot of kind of like the major cities, Minneapolis, Chicago, Milwaukee, Kansas City, kind of the Midwest communities that we primarily talk to have that activity to a lesser extent. And one of the things that we want to start getting this to is that it doesn't just have to be kind of the major cities. This can be your Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which has 200,000 people. This can be your Bemidji, Minnesota, my hometown that has 20,000 people. This doesn't have to be a big city thing. This model of making sure that these collisions and these people and groups are talking together is scalable.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's still, I mean, we know these global big, let's call it startup and ecosystem hubs, innovative smart cities in the world, but I think this regional and local focus and leveraging that on the one hand locally, but also like transferring and scaling it to other parts of the world where you have actually the same combinations of topics and of resources. That is probably the next wave you can do when all global topics are done. Let's call it like this a little bit flatly. So okay, let's come back to your current job. So you're as an ecosystem manager. What is your daily job? So what are you doing? What can we think? How can we imagine what is actually what are your tasks to be done?
Yeah, so like I said, on the Grand Farm, we got the corporate startups, growers, policymakers, education, and investors. So a lot of that is bringing people together.
Okay.
So we do a lot of events. So big conferences. So next week we'll have a couple hundred people attending our space agriculture conference. This is kind of one of my fun ones that I get to do, where we get to think about the far future of agriculture. We're going to have about 100 high school kids there doing a bunch of different trials and research around space agriculture to get them excited. 2 weeks ago, we brought about 40 of our partners out to Seattle, Washington in the United States. One of our biggest partners is Microsoft. So we brought our partners in these groups to Microsoft's campus headquarters there. So if you think about the idea of like these collisions happening. We had farmers, we had startups, we had government all coming and colliding with one of the largest corporates in the world with Microsoft. Um, and a lot of it is really just the matchmaking that I like to call it.
Hmm.
I was a best man in a wedding where I connected. I was a matchmaker between the bride and the groom, and I kind of still compare that's really my job. You know, we can talk. I just had a drone company that was in town from the UK the other day, and got them connected into kind of some talent pipeline and some funding resources and some other startups that they could collaborate with. And so really the way I like to think about it is, you got this wide net with this ecosystem is we want to know what's happening out there so we can start making these connections.
And how far do you go in terms of the matchmaking? Is it just like bringing the different groups together and let them then afterward discussing their topics? Or the question is more, how deep into the business models do you go? Or is it that they then have to search their way alone? Or are there also formats for later stages?
Sure. Yeah, so I would say that there's kind of a couple of different tiers that we look at. We do so kind of our funding model is we have our partnerships. So this is mainly kind of the big corporates, and so with the Grand Farm, there's two functions within Grand Farm. There's our ecosystem side, so that's our very public facing events, program, knowing what's out there, and then we have our program management office where we work with partners on deep dives of technology. And so a good way of thinking about this is like this funnel, right? I think I was telling you about this. So we want to know what's out there. We want to funnel them into an group. And so, from the base level, that base level introduction, we'll do that for anybody, free, open, we're a nonprofit, open, neutral platform. We just want to make these connections. And, oftentimes that's just an email introduction and we have no idea what happens with it. But, with our partners, we can do a lot more formal business planning around that. A good example is we worked with a large organization here that's focused on sugar beets, and they have a trouble with workforce shortage like everybody else in agriculture. But they have these large, massive sugar beet pilers, and they want to help automate that. So what we do for them and with them, and then for a lot of our big corporate partners, is what we call solution sourcing. So we do a kind of robust study on what is the challenges that they're trying to solve, and then we do kind of a market analysis of what's out there, either commercially viable products that they can just kind of deploy and purchase, or in this case, more customized engineering solutions. So we help put together an RFP. We brought in about 6 different global engineering firms and help them run the RFP and the selection process. And now they've chosen one and are working to automate that process. So we can, kind of what's nice is that we know everybody that's out there. We can help really speed up that process where we have those connections built out already.
Okay, sounds good. Maybe the example is very very clear. Nevertheless, can you just provide a little bit more topic deep dives into where does the agricultural ecosystem is actually proceeding? So what are the topics there? Why should the different parties should collaborate? What is the real value when you drill that down into this really growing and important sector for all of us, agriculture? Sometimes we forget that. So do you have you just at the conference with this outlook of the future, maybe you can let us share a little bit about what the ideas with an ecosystem perspective are out there, what are the trends there, so how can ecosystem thinking in agriculture can be leveraged?
Yeah, well, first off, agriculture is obviously an extremely important industry, as with the growing population, that often the majority of people aren't thinking about agriculture on a daily basis. They go to the grocery store, go to the restaurant, and they don't think about where that food is coming from, but it's extremely important. So there's a lot of focus that needs to be done on it. And then I would say that historically, so there's kind of been a couple of challenges that the industry has faced. Pardon the pun, but agriculture is often held in a silo, right? So like some of like the farmers are farming, they talk to their neighbors, but that's about it.
Hmm.
So there needs to be kind of that education push. And then, what's really challenging from a farmer perspective is their livelihood is outside of their control. It's dictated by the weather, it's dictated by market conditions, by pricing, regulations that are happening in Asian markets can directly impact growers here. So it's a stressful job.
Hmm.
So how can we support them and create these connections? And then I would say the other piece is, and especially why this is relevant from a grand farm perspective in this global ecosystem, is that the challenges that the farmers in Fargo, North Dakota face are not the challenges that a farmer in Germany faces, or Brazil, or the southern United States.
Hmm.
So this model of these farms, or these kind of like ecosystem building, can only go so far when you're only based in Fargo, North Dakota. So that's why we envision this model kind of scaling. So we're in pretty deep discussions with with some groups kind of located throughout the U.S. and even in a couple of different countries around building out these kind of model farms where you can have the actual farm, where you can do test plots, projects, events, bring people together, and then this ecosystem building. Because again, the problems of Fargo, North Dakota are not the problems of Berlin.
Hmm. And I mean, the question is, what you mentioned that in your statement right now. So we as consumers, we still forget where does our food come from, and we don't have the link to agriculture. Do you think that will change due to digitization, due to, of course, scarce of resources, etc., so that like the future market will be more and more integrated from farm to fork? I mean, that's an expression I learned when I had contact with companies in that sector. But and they were telling me, hey, in the next years, probably we as consumers, we will know much more about the food because everything will be tracked and traced. We will, of course, we have this trend of sustainability. We have this trend of healthy food. Maybe sometimes also smart food will be come up one day. So all this topics which are still not there, but which are like on the horizon. So will that change the way we as consumers look and have touch points to agriculture? And if so, in what extent? What is there your vision of the future?
Yeah, I mean, well, one, I really hope so.
Okay.
I don't know if I don't think it's a very controversial statement to say that having people more connected with their food is a good thing. Um, you know, I think that farm to fork concept is going to be really important. Right now, obviously, global economy, what we're eating now is like coming from who knows where. But if as we can build out these more kind of regional farms, and that closer connection to our food is going to be really important. One of the things that, just talking about kind of the future of agriculture that I get really excited about and I think is really interesting is this idea of controlled environmental agriculture. That's your like indoor agriculture, greenhouses, growing
Hmm.
towers, things like that. And if you could have those real connection, you know, like that is providing a real connection to where your food is coming from. Is if you're having a growing tower in the restaurant where you can see the food is growing. If each, like I envision these, I just toured last week this storage container in Fargo, North Dakota. Snow all around it. It was about 10 degrees Fahrenheit, and you open the door, and there's lots of herbs and romaines and greens that are growing in there. If I envision like in these food deserts that exist, what if every couple of blocks in our inner cities had these um, storage containers growing, that connection? The other piece that I get really excited about, especially having, kids, is this connection to your food. Having one of those towers or these storage containers for like every school where the school
Hmm.
groups and classes can go out there, take care of the food, and learn about where their food's coming from. their lunches can be produced with it, so it's healthy, it's education. There's STEM, there's science, technology, education, engineering, and mathematics involved with it because it's all technology driven. That to me is really exciting.
It really sounds a little bit like science fiction, but
Yeah.
still, I think it will come. Hopefully, I'm sure. And so thanks for sharing also these insights. Coming back once again at the end to Emerging Prairie. I mean, we have talked about your offerings, about how you do it. Now let's talk a little bit about challenges and also your advices to mitigate them. So, what are the challenges in building up such a local driven ecosystem? What did you face there in past?
Yeah, that's a good question. Is one I would say one is, just being really clear on kind of the mission. Like you have a whole podcast kind of clearing up what are these ecosystem, why is it important for the business community. Telling that from a storytelling aspect for the whole community can be challenging about what is an ecosystem, why is it important, how does it drive change, and really tracking kind of those key KPIs. Is also that can be a little bit nebulous. We're not like focused specifically on economic development. Our vision statement is we want to improve the human condition. So that's pretty tough to track.
How do you do it then?
Yeah, exactly. It's not about like just number of jobs created or amount of warehouse or like office space that have been leased out. So I think kind of tracking what does success look like. And then, I think third, there's a lot of different areas that we get pulled in, on the Grand Farm side specifically, kind of my background is media marketing. So we have a lot of different marketing channels. We have our own podcast. We work closely with a bunch of different publications that we share content with. And then we also have a farm that we're building out. We have a facility. We're going to be looking at expanding. There's a lot of different avenues that you could take down this. How can we kind of clearly articulate, like just narrow in on the focus? And then finally, maybe the last one, I'll just kind of highlight that I'm also excited about kind of going back to the kind of the kids and education is, we really want to start figuring out how we can engage with school groups and get in from a younger basis where we can start promoting this kind of thinking and philosophy around technology, innovation, entrepreneurship. So I think that's really exciting. It's tough to do. The business model of that is really tough. How do you fund that? There's some grants and stuff like that, but to do it at scale can be challenging since every school is kind of strapped for cash the way it is. So, I think the business model around this model, we are a nonprofit, so we're always looking for different funding sources, can be a challenge as well.
Okay. But that brings me to the pre-ultimate question, and partly probably you already answered, but what will have changed if we had this interview in, let's say, 3 years from now? So what are the future priorities for you? What do you see there as concrete targets for the future?
Yeah, well, to touch on each of those ecosystems kind of at large here. So kind of on our entrepreneurial side, I think, we'll have more robust programming, kind of more larger teams. So our, we've built up a lot since COVID. I think we're at close to 30 people now. So how can we support those entrepreneurs, get them connected? I think we'll probably be expanding a little bit more geographically. Our technology side with our Emerging Digital Academy, our coding school, I think there's going to be different programming. We've had a lot of discussions around certificates and boot camps around cybersecurity and some of those hot topics. We're doing a lot more on the ecosystem building side, so a lot more events, technology, meetups, things like that. And then from the Grand Farm side, I think there's really kind of two things in the in 3 years we're going to have our site fully built out. So I encourage people to go to our grandfarm.com to see kind of the full renderings of what our facility is going to look like. And then I do think that we'll be expanded into different geographies as well and have these farms in a couple of other regions.
Sounds pretty cool. So we will actually look at it from an outsider perspective and then the ultimate question I always have to all people in this vlogcast is a little bit brain teaser, which is, where do you personally integrate or act with an ecosystem mindset in your private life? Probably matchmaking, but maybe there's
Yeah.
something different. So what is there your answer?
Well, I love to host parties. I'm kind of when we bring people, like when we have parties or things like that, I'm more focused on making sure everybody else is talking and want to kind of like, hey, have you met so and so? I think it's kind of going back to that matchmaking, being the best man at that wedding. So how can I think that what really makes people happy is relationships. And that's like if you have a meaningful relationship, that will drive true happiness in your life. And so, how can we create more of those meaningful relationships? And that's through these connections, these opportunities to bring people together. And I
That's
get
a,
excited about that.
that's a great closing remark, and I hope now also we have started a meaningful relationship. No,
That's
just
right.
kidding. But basically, thank you so much, Andrew. That was a great conversation. So I think myself and also the audience can learn a lot about local ecosystems, about focus on agriculture. So we already combined two really, really important topics. So once again, thanks for having you here, and take care, and see you soon on this channel or on other channels.
Thanks, Julian. Looking forward to listening. Keep following along on your journey here.
Perfect. Great.